You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, December 3rd, 2021. Happy December, Andrew, or as I like to call it, Spooky-cember.
No, it's not called that.
We didn't do anything for Spookytober, though, so I just feel like we gotta, check off that box before we can eliminate the spooky from whatever suffix we apply to it. Maybe? I don't know. No.
I mean, yes, let's watch spooky Christmas movies.
Right?
Whatever. And they exist, by the way.
Right. But it's crazy. It's been, we're in December. 2020 is about to end. Finally. Feels like
2021.
2020 is about to end.
It's 2020.
Last year in my brain was 2019. And next year is going to be 2021 because we couldn't have lost 2 years of our lives, right?
Uh-huh. Right. Of course not. Yeah, certainly, except it's 2021.
I know. It doesn't feel like a year has passed.
It doesn't.
And then, but hey, ask me in 45 minutes, it'll feel like 5 years have passed. What is,
this is the future.
This is the future, and the future is now. And apparently the future was yesterday as well. So what are we going to do for this future? The thing is that the future keeps bringing us new content. That's the one thing that keeps us grounded and happy. And, well, happy in quotes. We're really starting on a bummer. Welcome to December. Seasonal. What's the seasonal effect disorder?
Sad.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll cut this out. But the thing that can keep us moving forward, despite the fact that it feels like everything's standing still in a lot of ways, is that new content comes out. And the Marvel train is still chugging forward with the release as of this recording. I don't know how many episodes are up, but they did fairly recently, last week. Okay, so 3 episodes at this point, but they did last week release the first 2 episodes of the new Hawkeye show, a show I'm very much looking forward to. I have not started watching it yet. I should say that right up front. So this will be generally, I'm guessing, a spoiler-free conversation because it's just a jumping off point for what we want to talk about today. But that show is going, and it looks great. You've seen the first 2 episodes as of this recording, or have you seen all 3?
Just the first 2.
So you'll be bringing in some of your experience there, but there's stuff to look forward to. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there is,
and there seems to be a lot of good stuff even more good stuff to look forward to in 2022. So Hawkeye has come out, but it hasn't come without its fair share of controversy, as we like to say around here.
Right. Controversy, as we like to say in the Rebels English.
Right.
And
did you watch the advertisements for it, Andrew?
Oh, stop. And it's not actually, I think the controversy is not new. It's something that's actually come up in other, not even only other Marvel stuff, because I know the same kind of discussions came up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And quite frankly, they come up in a lot of these adapted works, right? Which is the idea that, so, for those who don't know, the current Hawkeye is based very much, not entirely, right? But based heavily on a Hawkeye series of comics,
right?
I think written by Matt Fraction,
correct,
and illustrated by David Aya.
Or yeah.
Or I think we talked about this before the show. How is his name pronounced?
Right before recording, I went on YouTube and just tried to listen to as many interviews as possible so I could hear him say his name. And he said "aha," but that seems weird. And in another interview, he said some people say aha. I'm from Spain. It said aha there. Some people say Asia. He's like, as long as you say nice things about me, I don't care what you say. So, fair enough. I'm going to take that as permission to say it as comfortably as possible. But
so the current show is, the current Hawkeye or the current Disney thing is based on this series by Matt Fraction and David David Aha. And but the problem is that the show comes out and it doesn't necessarily, either the concern that the internet has found is either they're not crediting them,
right,
or they're not paying them,
right. And I should say
it's two different issues, but I want to highlight them both.
And I think the criticism really popped with even before the show came out. It was with the advertisements actually, where the iconography they're pulling is literally from the iconography that Aha had designed for his books with Fraction, like heavy. I mean, and this is where it sounds really obvious, but like arrow motifs and bullseye motifs, but specifically the way they're used in a graphic design sense are incredibly iconic, but also very much a part of what made that run with that Aha did with Fraction so unique and memorable. So it's so obvious that they pulled inspiration from that, as they should have, and because a lot of people, and that actually got a lot of people on board because that run is very well regarded. Full disclosure, I have not read that run. I'm guessing you have not read that run.
No.
And I do want to. I've always heard good things, but it doesn't have an X on it, so sorry guys.
But that is you raised a good point that it is. This was a series of comics about this character that were very well received as comics, to the point where when people thought about like what story do we tell about this character, they said let's do that one, or at least a variation of that, right?
And it wasn't an underrated run. It was on like bestsellers. It was like people saying, hey, if you want to get people to comics, read this run, because it's about this very grounded retelling or version of this classic Avengers character. And introducing the legacy of the character as well, and by kind of handing off the mantle, for lack of a better word. So like it is a well known run on the book, and so it wasn't like they were picking from obscurity here. Like people saw the ads and like, oh, that's like the Hawk. They're adapting the Hawkeye run, right? Basically. So sorry.
Well, and to be clear, this is something that Marvel Disney has done, right? Like, we know that they, like, when a new show or a new thing comes out, or a movie, like, they're adapting existing stories, right? Whether they say so or not, right?
Sure.
We know that, like, and even if they mix and match, right?
Loose adaptations, generally.
Right, like, WandaVision is very clearly inspired from, I think, two different stories, one about Vision and one about Wanda,
right?
But it's still like they're still like it's still there. Like people clearly look and say like this is you drew heavily from this work. This is a derivative work, as my brethren in the law would like to say. And so that's where this comes up, because with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, like they clearly leaned into Ed Brubaker's work on the character of the Winter Soldier,
and Sam becoming Captain America. Spoiler alert.
From I couldn't tell you who did that, but
no, but they did come up before the show. So,
this idea of these TV shows are inspired by comic books that were written and illustrated by people,
right? And so this came to a head because people were pointing out the advertising for the Hawkeye show and going like, oh, wow, this is super cool. They're pulling from the Fraction Aha run. And like I think David Aja came in and said, yeah, it'd be nice to get money for it. And everyone's like, what? You know, and that's what got some people upset, because as Andrew and I were talking about before we started recording, like, this is the common argument, like, and I think there's some interesting nuance that could be parsed here, but like, yeah, it's a very visually distinctive, you know, style they're going for. It's clearly evocative of what Aja did on that run, but let's not forget it's a book he made and style choices he made while employed for Marvel, for their character that's been around since the 60s, right? So it's not like it was stolen from a creator-owned work that he'd been working on as his magnum opus for his life's expression, that it wasn't stolen out from under him, like you see Hot Topic stealing shit from Instagram, right, for t-shirts. It was something he made for Marvel for this character. That's what people are saying. That's an argument to make, right? I'm not necessarily defending that, but I think there is a point to be made there. Mm-hmm. But that begs the question is the wrong word, but that does bring into the discussion, like, how much accreditation versus compensation versus just outright, credit should we be giving the creators of the comics that these shows and movies and stuff are based on, which is what you were working towards there.
Right.
So kind of like, well, you have a legal kind of angle on that, and we've brushed on, I think for like 7 years now, we've always been like, Andrew, we got to spend some time to talk about copyright. I'm not saying we're going to do that now because it's a show all its own, but where does this fall? Because people bring up words like work for hire and stuff like that. What does that mean? What does the creator sit in a contract like that?
So it depends. And so I will preface by saying I'm only talking about the United States. Other countries, I got fucking nothing. And I say that, but I also want to say that other countries have things that are relevant mm-hmm. to the discussion. And I'll touch on at least one that I know about. But basically, in the United States, if you create something, creative, it's yours. You own the copyright. Unless the easy answer is unless you were working for someone in the capacity of doing that thing, mm-hmm. right? Like you were employed by a place where you were asked to draw pictures of characters and you drew a character, then that belongs to your employer.
Right.
Copyright wise, right? Mm-hmm. Or you were employed as a writer by a company to mm-hmm. write stories and you wrote a story, then your employer owns the copyright to the story.
Right.
Now for other stuff, like for things that don't fall under the very explicit owner, the very explicit employer relationship, there's like, well, here's a whole list of things that could be under that work for hire bucket only if it's agreed to.
Right.
So like if someone is like, hey, I'm doing a thing, I'm not your employee, however, it falls under this category and we agreed to it, then it's work for hire mm-hmm. for purposes of this contract.
Right.
Which I think the idea is that with a lot of this comic book stuff, it nebulously falls under one of these buckets. Either mm-hmm. they were employees or they were employees. They were not employees. They were contractors who agreed to these agreements, or they were contractors that didn't. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's actually, I actually think there's lawsuits about this, especially with the originals like Jack Kirby.
Right.
Where like that whole thing of he never agreed to this. Like it is his. Right. And so that changes the rules.
Right. That's ongoing. Like every 5 years or so, the Jack Kirby estate sues to regain ownership of things like the Fantastic Four and whatnot.
Right.
I think the biggest success court case would be something like the artist Neil Adams went to bat for the creators of Superman in the 70s. Siegel and Schuster? $100, all right, something like that. But and he actually got them compensation because they sold Superman for a steal and didn't get any kind of compensation despite becoming the one of the company's flagship characters. And
so imagine if, like, to give you context, imagine if I'm a ruthless comic book company and I hire Dan to draw my comic. I hire him as an employee. Then in most cases, and I give him all the benefits of an employee, then probably he's an employee and whatever he draws belongs to me. Now imagine I contract him. I say, like, you know what? You're an independent contractor. I'm going to pay you just for your work.
right.
Then it kind of depends on whether or not we agree that it belongs to me or not.
So if just a nuance here is, if you're work for hire, are you an employee or are you contract under this?
Normally the work for hire is you're an employee.
Okay.
Right. Like, and again, I'm simplifying a lot, but I'm trying to, like, the idea is that if you're an employee, like you are, working 9 to 5 for the boss, and you're drawing shit, right, in the draw factory, then it belongs to the boss.
Right.
But if you're an independent contractor and you're just like doing the stuff, then it kind of depends on whether or not you agreed that belongs to the boss. And I think in general, most of these Marvel at Sec or at all, it always belongs to the boss. Actually, no, I say that. I actually think it depends. I think Marvel was much more pushy about this.
Sure.
Because I think DC actually contracted a lot to give the creators something, whereas I think Marvel did not. At least that's what I've seen. Because I feel like I've seen more cases of DC creators getting something.
Sure.
Not all of them, but some of them. Whereas Marvel, universally, it's like, no, get bent.
Right.
So that's this background of you're a creator that creates something for a company, whether it be the biggest company or the smallest company. Like, that's kind of the context. And now we have these TV shows, these movies, these whatever. And it raises that question of, like, well, when Disney makes a big show, or Marvel, whatever you want to call it, makes a big show out of Matt Fraction and David Aya's work, what obligation do they have to them?
Right. That's a good question.
I mean, and in general,
technically none, right?
Or unless they contracted, right? Unless there's a contract that says, like, fuck you, you have to credit me. I'm being kind of a pest there because most people that contract with these companies, like, you're doing a job, like, you're getting paid,
right?
You're not thinking about what will happen to my work in 20 years.
Right.
And I say that not in defense of big company. I say that as an understanding of why anyone would, like, his people say, why would anyone ever agree to that? Like, because shit, man, you need a job.
Shakespeare's got to get paid.
Right? And so it's entirely understandable that someone would agree to, like, yeah, whatever I have to do to get paid for drawing pictures of Hawkeye, right? Like, who'd have guessed I could draw Hawkeye and I'll get paid for it? Right?
It's just that it's the cultural repercussions here, because they, whether contract or work for hire, this team was hired to write this book, to create this book, I should say.
Yes.
And what they didn't know at the time, even though they're like, we're going to do something bold with this, what it ended up being was a character defining run on the character. That, like, this changed the paradigm of this character called Hawkeye. Ostensibly, in the eyes of many people, like, that's the Fraction and Hawkeye, right? That's their character for all intents and purposes. Ding. And that adds a lot more cultural weight. Unfortunately, adds no legal weight, I'm guessing. Right?
Well, at least in the U.S.
Right. Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. So I know that I believe in parts of Europe there are attribution rights where and again, I don't know European law, but I know that there are things where like, oh, you created this, so by law, you can never not get attribution. So
Right.
for context, to give an example, in American patent law, if you patent something, if you're working for a company when you make the patent, like you invent, crazy shit, right? But you work for the company that makes things like that, well, then they can basically take it. Like they can transfer the copyright or the patent. However, you always get your name on it.
Right.
Right. That's a thing in patent law that's different than copyright. So they were all like on the patent, it will always have Dan Bethel, creator of, Silly String. Even if you worked for, Nerf at the time.
Yeah.
And
is that kind of similar to what we see with, this is kind of, but like with Doctor Who, whenever they use K9 or the Daleks, they always have to say Daleks created by Terry Nation.
Well, I assume that either that's just part of the like at least the British copyright law, not the EU anymore. Thank you. Thanks, Brexit. No, I assume that's either part of the UK copyright law, or they're just those people contract like champs. But I think that's actually, there's got to be some reason that that's being done, because otherwise it wouldn't be done. That's my rule. Like, one thing I've learned in the United States is if there's not a legal reason to make people do things, it rarely happens.
Right. And
so for example, for those not understanding Dan's comment, in Doctor Who, anytime the Daleks appear, it says Daleks created by Terry Nation. Anytime, actually now the Weeping Angels appear, it says Weeping Angels created by Stephen Moffat.
Right, meaning they're not owned by the BBC. And so whenever
or they are owned by the BBC, however, they still have to they have to attribute them.
Right. And I think it's a case-by-case basis. I know that the Daleks, I think, are wholly owned by Terry Nation, because I remember reading about, this is me going way off base here, the reboot of Doctor Who back in 2005, where the episode Dalek, the original script wasn't a Dalek because they weren't sure they were able to get the Daleks. So it's almost like a weird licensing deal in a lot of ways. But that's, again, maybe that's a very special case scenario, because Terry Nation had really good lawyers. I don't know. But but I know for a lot of Marvel creators, part of Rob Liefeld's deal was that his contract was that anytime they use Deadpool anywhere, they have to put Deadpool created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza, and same thing with Cable and Domino and any other character he created, and that's just part of his contract. Even though he was an employee of Marvel at the time, he just was able to, get that in there. But it's
right. Well, but it raises the question, so imagine Deadpool the movie. Or Deadpool 2, right? Marvel is obligated by contract to give Rob Liefeld and whoever else a credit. But do they have to do anything else?
Right.
Do they have to pay him?
Right.
Because that's actually one of the complaints I've seen levied against Marvel. And actually, I think some people have said that DC has been better about this because, and it sounds like because DC negotiated contracts,
right?
Or at least not the DC, employees all had much harder contracts where they had to get paid for stuff. But it raises the question, if Matt Fraction and David Aya did this work that is now, the one they're making a $1 million TV show out of. Should they be paid?
Right.
Should they be credited is one question. Should they be paid is another. Because, it's one thing. It's actually, I'm shocked that Marvel just doesn't slap every fucker's name on it, right? Based on shit, but you were part of it. Because that cost them nothing.
Right. Well, I think that the workaround is that they do. But it's buried in the end credits under special thanks. special thanks to to Matt Fraction and David Aja for making this seminal run of this character no one cared about. Right? And that's as far as it goes, when it should be like in those opening credits, like based on, like there was a crossover event, I believe, called Age of Ultron. I think the creators of that crossover are just given a special thanks. The creator of the New Mutants, whose name I can't remember right now, but that's okay. His name was in the special thanks of the movie. And in the theatrical run, it was misspelled. Fixed for the home release, thankfully. Good God. But, like, that guy actually was co-creator of the New Mutants as the artist. But wasn't, but we never see that stuff, I think, except for Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. We never see the names up front because there's no real rhetorical weight to those names.
All of... Shit, what's his name?
Bob Kane.
V for Vendetta.
Oh, Alan Moore.
Alan Moore. So, or we see Alan Moore.
No.
Or we don't. We only see his illustrator.
Because he had a good contract. He's like, don't put my names on shit.
That's a good example, right? Like, that's a guy that had... Because his original work was very contracted.
Right.
Because it was like, he owned it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think actually Watchmen was the same way, right? Then when it came time to the movie, he had the control over the film adaptation where he said, please don't put my name on this.
Right.
So it is a weird place. And actually, like, I actually really like that Alan Moore had control over that.
Yeah.
Also, I think he's kind of a dipshit.
Right.
But,
well, whether he had creative control or just cultural cachet, like, I don't know what it was actually. I'd have to do the research. But like, yeah, he was able to get his name removed.
Well, I think that was a license thing. Like, he could do that, but also raises the question, right? So the works of Alan Moore that V for Vendetta, Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I think they all, were they done through Image?
No, Watchmen's DC. Who did V? It was a British publication, so it under different restrictions and laws over there.
I assumed that they were all done under the creator-owned Image.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I think that's Dark Horse, which is kind of, it's another sort of smaller publisher here, but yeah.
But because the reason I mentioned that is that, a company like Image, owner, creator controlled, whatever, they would have that ability. But again, it goes back to, like, if you work for Marvel, do you even have, like, if you're writing Hawkeye and you're the 7th person to write Hawkeye, do you even have control over, like, or should you, right? Should you have control over what you do?
Yeah.
That sounds a bit gross, right. But, like, it raises the question of, like, someone creates a thing and then you write something else. Should you be able to control what you did, what they did? Like, what's the right place? Should a guy that writes the 17th book about Captain America have any control over what they wrote about Captain America?
Right. I think that was actually one of the points I wanted to get to. First, before I get to that, it looks like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a strange case. It bopped all over the place. It was at one point published by DC because it was originally published through, or one of the publishers was through Wildstorm, which DC bought. And I'm guessing part of the contracts actually kept Alan Moore was able to keep the IP because he moved it to a different publisher after that. So it was ostensibly published by DC, but not intentionally. Because I'm sure Alan Moore, that was the last place he wanted to go at that point. But yeah, no, that's one of the things, like, we talked about Deadpool, right? And we were talking about this with Winter Soldier and with Hawkeye. But, like, yeah, so they have to put Rob Liefeld's name on everything, saying this was created by Rob Liefeld and the scripter at the time, Fabian Nicieza. But, like, what about the comic run that actually made Deadpool like a cultural bomb? Because Liefeld, he was popular when Liefeld drew him for 3 issues before he left to form Image Comics. But like Deadpool became Deadpool long after Liefeld was around. And like, where's, so if the Deadpool on screen, honestly, as a person that read those early 90s issues where Deadpool premiered, the Deadpool on screen is not really the Deadpool I read in the comics, because the Deadpool in the comics was a villain. What we're seeing on screen is like Joe Kelly and Ed McGuinness's Deadpool. So why not put his
another
name?
I think comparable is Punisher.
Sure, yeah.
Where he originally showed up as a villain in a Spider-Man, right? However, the character that most people want to talk about came later in, people once it was done as its own comic, which I believe were done by other people. So like that raises the question. And honestly, like, we can keep pulling out of a hat, like, the first Green Lantern was done in whatever, but what about the one that was done later?
Right. Well, coincidentally, the argument, one of the arguments I see, and until I made this made this correlation on the show right here, I didn't really see why he was coming from this angle, but one of the interesting arguments I heard was from Rob Liefeld himself, saying, because it was actually around Winter Soldier, like, why not put Brubaker's name on screen in the opening credits, saying, Captain America and Bucky created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, and why not also say on the screen at the beginning of the film, Winter Soldier created by Ed Brubaker and whoever the artist was. And Liefeld's argument was like, well, yeah, Brubaker and his artist was the creator of the Winter Soldier, but he couldn't have created the Winter Soldier if Jack Kirby and Joe Simon hadn't created Bucky. And so, fuck Brubaker, because it all comes down to that original Bucky sidekick from the 1940s, right? And he's like, so everybody that comes after that doesn't matter. That's his argument. But then it wasn't until we're talking about, like, well, yeah, because he's saying that because he created Deadpool, right? And like, let's not beat around the bush. Deadpool became much more popular and a household name out of Liefeld's control. But no. It all started with he planted the seeds. It's all there. I didn't realize that until now, but that's the argument he makes, and there's an argument to be made there. Go ahead.
Well, but this is also a thing that, like, we've talked about Batman and the whole, like, in fact, in the past we talked about the whole the push to have what's his name,
Bill Finger
recognized. But it's not just Bob Kane and Bill Finger, right? Like, it's not.
Right, it's like, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, right? Like, it's from the 70s.
And I mean, it's so many people. It's, shit, man, it's Frank Miller. Like, as much as
honestly,
I don't want to acknowledge, right? There's so many people that contributed to this character story that you can't, like... that's the thing, right? Like, if you're going to make a movie or a TV show, if you're going to create a derivative work, yes... It's important to acknowledge the original creator, right? Always, right? Because that's the person that put the fire on the ground,
right?
But also, if you're going to use one of these derivative works, maybe acknowledge them too, right?
But I guess the question is where and when should it be up front, like, or is special thanks good enough?
I mean, I do think that, first of all, like, yes, acknowledge it up front. Based on, if you're going to put based on this character written by this person,
right,
and based on in this story based on written by this person, like, that's not hard, and illustrated by this person, because in comics you can't leave that out,
right?
Like, that's dumb. Like, I think that's important.
It is,
acknowledging them also is free. Like,
right.
It's free.
You don't lose anything by doing it. Honestly,
should they be paid? I mean, yes, I like to think so.
Right.
Although I also acknowledge that I'm like a dirty, out of control leftist. But like, I get the idea that this is where it gets back to that whole work for hire thing. I do think that if someone created a work that's now making millions of dollars and they got paid tens of dollars, like, yeah, you should go back and just, like, if not, like, legally, like morally. You should acknowledge like, oh wow, actually we're making lots of money off of what you did.
Right.
We should at least give you something.
Right.
We should pay you some fraction.
No.
Some
Matt fraction. Damn it. But how about this? But hey, you can come to the premiere. You can bring a friend, right? We'll give you free copies of the DVD, right? You want a poster? We'll get you a poster. You want a picture with the star? We'll get you that.
And that would be great if the CEO of Disney didn't make dipshit money.
Right.
Right. Like,
right.
That's a hard sell. Like,
right.
Yeah, sure. You're using stuff that like was agreed to 20 years ago.
Right.
That you're now using to make millions of dollars.
Right. And yeah, you could say that, well, the writer and artist aren't working on the movie. Well, let's be fair. CEO of Disney didn't either. Right? Like,
I mean, this is why, like, in Hollywood, writers have royalties.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, like, if you're going to use an adapted work, you should just figure something out. Yes, right. And I get it. Like, oh, it's owned. Like, yes, technically Marvel owns it because it was a work for hire.
Right.
But this is also, like, this is part of the idea of, you know, like, don't burn people. Because right now, what people are burning up on Twitter, and they have been for all of these shows, is that the creators are getting treated like shit.
Right.
Not in all things, but, like, in enough things, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, that's bad publicity. Like, don't do that. Just pay them something.
In the majority of these cases, it's the creators that are not getting monetary compensation, that are not even getting credit except for the name and a special thanks and maybe an invite to the premiere, that are actually doing the Lord's work and promoting this thing they have no reason to promote because they're excited about it, right? And, like, the thing is, they're doing that partially because they're excited, but also because they don't want to burn bridges. But it's actually the only people that are burning bridges is Marvel, is DC, is whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're not recognizing the talent that actually made this thing happen in the first place. I mean, going back to the Liefeld example with Winter Soldier, I'm like, I'm sorry, you lose that argument with the Winter Soldier when they decide to call the movie The Winter Soldier.
Right.
Right? They didn't call it Captain America, Bucky Comes Back, right?
Right.
Which, good choice, right? And you make a really good point, and this is just me grandstanding here as a person that writes and draws, but, like, I think both companies and a lot of culture is more willing and knee-jerk to give writers credit on characters and storylines that are being adapted. But we cannot forget the artists. That like you said, Andrew, comics are a visual medium, and they would not exist without the artists involved. And especially, I think it's what I loved about the let's just use the right word, tragedy of the Hawkeye case is that it's a good argument that really brings to light the importance of the artist in the scenario. Yes, Matt Fraction is a world-renowned writer, award-winning writer. He has an indelible thumbprint on the Hawkeye run that he did with AHA, but obviously there's no erasing. There's no Hawkeye run without that man's art either, and it's the first thing that people started talking about. But it wasn't until the artist spoke up and said, "Yeah, it'd be nice to get some money too," that people were like, "Oh shit," right? And it's just really important to not forget that comics are made by writers and artists, and not just writers, but. I'll start ranting, and we shouldn't do that.
No, so. It's important, and actually, one thing I want to make sure that I'm not poo-pooing on the work for hire concept. Right. This is actually one where I think, like, as a concept, it actually makes sense. You know, like, I hire you to do art. You know. Right. You know, whatever the business. And actually, you can imagine lots of businesses where this works, where it makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, like, part of me is like, no one's really upset about, the marketing guy for Wendy's isn't getting millions of dollars because he was hired to, you know, draw a fucking picture. You know, work for hire conceptually makes sense, but maybe we have to acknowledge that there are places where we need to, either do it differently or have, stops on it, whatever that it is.
Right.
Like, to me, it just, like, comic books maybe are ones where the basic work for hire model maybe isn't the best fit.
And that's the thing. It's for the big two at the very least, it's the only model. Like, there's no option. Which that's what makes it a problem. It's not the work for hire model. It's that, like, it's the only model, and that feeds a broken system. So,
especially I think when it comes to stuff like David Aja and his, like, iconic art, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I always joke, like, when the guy that makes the thing that looks exactly like the other guy's thing, like,
right.
Well, maybe his thing is not as important. And I didn't know about this until I found out about, like, the whole business of, like, oh, you submitted to the art house, and the art house comes back with art that looks just like what you asked for, right?
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's work for hire, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want anything iconic or distinct.
Right.
I wanted shit that looked like what I gave you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, like, when it comes to comics, so much of it is like, I want the iconic look, or at least in some cases, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's a big discussion.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Marvel and DC and all these companies, but mostly Marvel right now because they're in the doghouse. They should compensate and credit the creators of the stories that they're now profiting off of. Mm-hmm. That's my crazy leftist bent right now. David Aja, Matt Fraction should both, and actually the other people that worked on that, because it wasn't just the two.
That's
right.
True. Yeah.
Like,
somebody lettered it.
Let's okay. That's just tracing.
Whoa.
I'm teasing. No, but, like, just the idea that, like, the people that worked on that should get a little bit more, right? Because their story has become the new big thing. And
it's good business for Marvel. It gets people to want to keep working for them, right? It's you know what? I think other businesses call this, what do you call it? A bonus. Right? Like, you did good work. It's helping our company thrive even more. Boom. Here's some extra. That's like what every other business does. But whatever, sure.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say every other business.
No, that's not true.
It's America.
That's true. It's true.
No business.
So, we solved the problem. Yeah. That's good. We did it. High five.
If only.
Well, sorry. So, that was a big distraction for what I wanted to talk about. So, did you like the first 2 episodes?
Yeah. No, it's good.
Awesome. I'm excited to watch it.
No. I am shocked. I'm shocked. I did not expect to like a show about Hawkeye starring Jeremy Renner.
Oh, see, I just figured it was, in my head, it's Hawkeye starring Haley Steinfeld and with Jeremy Renner. So there you go.
No, I was actually watching the first 2 episodes. I'm like, oh, this is I mean, because I say that as someone who, like, watched all the movies that have existed and was like, wow, this character sucks. Right? And suddenly they're like, no, actually, this character's good. I'm like, wow, he is.
Like, honestly, his character did kind of peak in the first Thor movie when he was just, like, sitting up in a crane going like, I got him. You want me to take him out?
Like, I mean, you're not wrong. But suddenly, here we are. He has a show, and I mean, again, Jeremy Renner, I've watched all the Marvel movies. I thought he was just the guy that showed up, right?
Right.
Suddenly, I'm like,
that's how he acted.
This show is good.
Yeah.
Like, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He's like a guy that comes out of, like, capital A acting stuff. I was surprised he took the job in the first place. Now they have him being like a character, like a guy with problems, and he's like, oh, I got this. And big shock. Apparently he's pretty good at it. So, there you go. We all make choices, is what I'm saying. So I know when I start watching it, every time we start a new episode, I'll print out an index card, and before the opening credits end, I'll always hold it up to the screen where it says, created by Matt Fraction and David Aja. And no, I won't do that. That's too much work. But in my heart, I'll be doing that. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter or Instagram, where you can find us at our respective handles. On Twitter, Andrew can be found at ProfoundDark. You can find me at DBethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at ProfoundBrick and me and my work at DBethelComics.
While you're on our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you can find by going to the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find videos.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. They're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music and more at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 by attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcasts app or Spotify. What would help us out even more, though, would be to go to their respective storefronts and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. So this is the season of giving, Andrew.
Is it?
I think so. Because last month was the season of thanks, and the month before that was the season of scares. So this must be the season of giving. And you know what? I'm finding it hard. Finding it hard to give a shit.
Oof. I'm also finding it hard to give a shit, but that's just because I have some digestive issues.
Metamucil, my friend. That'll help you out right quick. Wow, I feel like we had an interesting conversation surrounded by just downer talk. Let's end with something positive, Andrew. What are you looking forward to this week, next week, any week? Just anything. Give me something, man.
Oh, I have nothing. No. What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? I mean, there's my day job stuff. Semester's about to end. That's good times. You know what? This is the season of giving, and I'm gonna get back to you on that. So, until you find a reason to suspend giving gifts, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
Andrew, how do you say Frank Miller in Spanish?
Frank Miller. That might be... Actually, that's French. I'm sorry.
Say it one more time.
Frank Miller.
Spanish, Andrew.
That's French. Sorry.
Frank Miller. Miller?
You're right.
Miller? It depends on where you want to put the accent, I guess. Hi, kitty cat. What are you doing? Okay. Licking your tum-tums. Rock on.
At least that cat's got a plan.
Unbridled hedonism.
I mean, what else is there, right?
Fair.
So it was me snapping earlier.
Oh, okay. It was just so forceful.
I was just so excited.
You are a master Spanish speaker.
I mean, I'm a Latinx.
You are, sorry. Yes, sorry. Your credibility supersedes my academic knowledge of Spanish.
Yes, there's a plot, but also we can just do dumb shit.
Right.
You know.
Oh. Oof. I dropped my bottle.